Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I have been so excited to do today's video because it's going to be all about one of my all-time favorite romance authors, my top favorite historical romance author, Lisa Kleypas. If you follow me, you probably already know how much I adore this woman and her books. I have a whole video guide on all her historical romances. If you're wondering where to start with her books, if you're new to her, where you should start, and just talking about all her different series. But for today's video, in honor of her newest release, her 2021 release, Devil in Disguise, I decided to read her earliest books. As you can see behind me, her very first 4 published books, 3 of which are completely out of print, and the ebook isn't even published. So I read her first 4 earliest releases and also the newest release, Devil in Disguise, which is book 7 in the Ravenel series, in order to see how Lisa Kleypas has changed since 1987, which was when she published her debut. I wanted to see how Lisa Kleypas's very first romances, her historical romances, I wanted to see how they were back then. I wanted to see if they still held up, if they held up to today's standards, and I also wanted to compare them to her new 2021 release, which has come out about 34 years later. Lisa Kleypas has been publishing for over 3 decades. She's one of the most beloved historical romance authors, and she is still publishing today, which not a lot of old school historical romance authors are still publishing today, but Lisa Kleypas is giving us what we want, what we need, because trust me, you guys need Devil in Disguise, which will be out by the time I post this video. Originally, I wanted to read 3 books for this video: her debut, Where Passion Leads, her new release, Devil in Disguise, and one more, Love Come to Me, because that is the only one of her 4 earliest published books that is still available for you guys to read. I didn't want to talk about 2 books and only have one of them be purchasable, accessible, because finding these 4 books, these old school books, especially in the paperback editions, is very, very hard. These are all rare editions out of print, which is why they get pretty pricey. Luckily, I was able to find these at very reasonable prices. So if you are interested in finding your own editions, I would be on the lookout for eBay and a lot of used bookstores. So going back to reading the books, I originally wanted to read 3 of them, but of course, this being Lisa Kleypas, I ended up reading 2 more. I decided, why not? Let's just read all 4 of them and talk about it, because there is so much to talk about. I really went on a whole journey when I read these romances. I pretty much inhaled these books and read them back to back to back. One of them is a new favorite book of mine. I loved it so much. Another one I was really disappointed by. But let's just jump into all my thoughts on these 5 books, starting with the new release, Devil in Disguise. So like I said earlier, Devil in Disguise is book 7 in the Ravenel series. It is the last book, I believe, in the series. Even before this book, the last book, Chasing Cassandra, was the last Ravenel character that needed her happily ever after. Neither of the main characters in Devil in Disguise are part of the Ravenel family, which, I'm not gonna lie, I am still kind of wondering why Lisa Kleypas decided to make this part of the series. I remember looking it up, and she posted on Facebook that she decided to make it part of the series because there's a lot of Ravenel side characters that showed up, but honestly, I don't remember there being that many Ravenel showing up, like maybe 2, 3 of them. You don't get to see the whole Ravenel family, so I would just make this like a standalone spin-off, or maybe the start to a new series. Crossing my fingers about that. So it is part of the Ravenel series according to the author and the publisher, but just don't expect to see every single Ravenel in it. I would more call this book a spin-off of It Happened One Autumn and Devil in Winter, which are 2 books in the beloved Wallflower series, because our heroine Merritt is the oldest daughter of Marcus and Lillian from It Happened One Autumn, and in case you couldn't tell from this title, the hero is somehow related to Sebastian from Devil in Winter. I'm not going to say exactly what it is because I don't want to spoil it, even though you can probably make a good educated guess about it, but I'll touch upon it a little bit more once I get into the book. Merritt, our heroine, is a young widow. She's taken over her late husband's shipping company. She's a businesswoman. She doesn't really expect to ever fall in love again, marry again, but then Kier, our hero, enters her life. I love these 2 so much. They are are perfection together. I want to say this is one of the most romantic romances from Lisa Kleypas because Keir is just so swoon-worthy. He is Lisa Kleypas's very first Scottish hero. He's a very proud Scottish whiskey distiller, which is how he first meets Merritt because they develop a business partnership. But as soon as Keir meets Merritt, it's over for him. He's just amazed and in awe of her, and also very hot for her. It is kind of insta-lust, insta-love, which I honestly don't mind. I kind of love that, especially from the hero. But I will say, if you're not a fan of either of those things, something does happen a little bit more into the romance that does slow things down. So even though it does start up really fast, the pacing does even out the more you read. I adore this book with my whole heart. I gave it 5 stars. It is easily the best romance that I've read so far in 2021. There's just so much Lisa Kleypas magic here. She is such a queen at the little moments in her romances. You can just see so clearly how much Keir treasures Merritt, all these little things that he does that show how much he cares for her, respects her, and loves her. Like he got a haircut before the very first date because he wanted to look nice and presentable for her. He calls her Mary, short for Merritt, and he also keeps this little slip of paper that Merritt typed on. And also, this man's lovemaking is just so freaking sensual. Lisa Kleypas isn't really known for super steamy or super kinky romances, but she knows how to make you feel. Like the passion, the sensuality between Keir and Merritt is just fire. I also really loved all the Scottishisms here. Like Keir has an accent. He is so proud to be Scottish, and it's also pretty funny sometimes when he talks about his pride in Scotland. If you can tell, I love this man, but I also love Merritt too. She's such a headstrong heroine. She's sweet and kind and lovely and just a really great heroine to read about. And I'm sure you all are wondering about the connection with Devil in Winter, with Evie and Sebastian especially. We get a lot of Sebastian in this book. If you loved him, you will be happy about this book. We even get a couple chapters in his point of view. I know there will be people who won't exactly be happy about finding out the relationship between Sebastian and Keir, but I really had no problem with it. We also get to see Evie, Lillian, and Marcus. There's a lot of Shallon and Marsden cameos, and because of this, I'm hoping we get even more second generation books, more spin-off books about all of the children. Merritt's brother Luke is pretty prominent in this book because he also works with Merritt at her shipping company, so he needs a book, and the rest of the Shallon kids also need a book, especially Raphael, who is off in America doing his thing, I think. I also thought it was interesting to see how London has changed since the original series, since the Wallflower series. It's been like over 20 years since the original 4 couples got married and had children. I think this book is set in the 1880s, so lots of industrial development going on, and it was nice to see a little bit of research going into that setting. But I mean, the romance here is obviously the shining star. I love Merritt and Keir. They are one of my new favorite couples from Lisa Kleypas. I'm also gonna throw out there, in the most vague way possible, there's also amnesia going on in this book. It was a total surprise to me, but I loved it. I just swooned the entire time I was reading this book. There's also a bit of mystery suspense going on as well. Someone is going after Keir, and there really is never a dull moment in this book. I don't know if this one tops Devil in Spring for me, which is book 3 in the Ravenels, but it is very close. I've already done like a little quick reread of this book, of Devil in Disguise, and I was just swooning all over again, especially over all the sweet nothings that Keir says to Merritt. It is such a romantic read, and I just loved it. If you want to read this book, I would highly recommend reading the Wallflower series prior to it. You honestly probably don't even have to read the Ravenels, the first 6 Ravenels, before reading this one. The connections between Devil in Disguise and the Wallflower series, especially books 2 and 3, they feature pretty heavily in this book, so you might be a little confused about things if you haven't read the Wallflower series, but I feel like you could still read fine as a standalone if you really want to. I don't know how many times I can say that I loved it, but I did. I just thought this book was perfect. My next read was Where Passion Leads, which is Lisa Kleypas's debut which came out in 1987. It's the first book in a duet, the Berkeley-Faulkner series. This book is about the Berkeleys. The hero is part of the Berkeley family. He's an earl, a very notorious rake. Our heroine here is not part of the upper class. She's actually a personal maid and a companion to another prominent family. So we have a couple from two different classes here, which I'm always a sucker for in historical romances. But this book is the definition of a bodice ripper. It is very old school. There is non-consent here, which is a pretty prominent thing that happens in old school romances, in bodice rippers. The hero rapes the heroine and it is very, very cringy to read. Obviously, this is like the biggest difference between her old stuff and her new stuff. So far, out of all the Lisa Kleypas books that I've read, this is the only one that has any sort of non-consent or dubious consent. I'm not sure if Lisa Kleypas ever does this again, but I actually knew about this scene going in because someone actually commented on one of my videos, probably when I hauled this one, talking about the hero raping the heroine. So I knew about it before I went into this book so I could prepare myself for it. If you want to read this book and want to skip that scene, I would skip the first two chapters and just start at chapter 3. But the whole plot of this book is our heroine Rosalie. She goes out one night to see the theater with her mother. Something happens and she gets lost in the very bad parts of London. Someone is about to rape her and the hero shows up to save her, only to rape her himself. He does it because he can. He is selfish. He hates responsibility. He is everything that is wrong with the upper class. Rand actually does immediately regret it and tries to spend the rest of the book atoning for what he did. Rosalie, of course, hates him for what he did, but she is forced to go along with him to Paris, to France, where Rand has some business to deal with because she really doesn't have any other choice as a ruined woman. So she's forced to go along with him to spend time with him and get to know him more. I surprisingly ended up enjoying this book. I was not really expecting to. Like, the way that I saw it, it's a bodice ripper. It's a product of its time from the 1980s. But I also saw the rape as Lisa Kleypas trying to make this hero at the beginning of the book to be the most vile kind of hero ever. And she changes him, makes him grow, makes him learn into someone who is worthy of the heroine's love. I gave this one 4 stars, a very surprised 4 stars, but obviously this book is not going to be for everybody. The content is not going to be for everybody. But I was just really fascinated by how Lisa Kleypas was able to change Rand. He makes amends by trying to respect Rosalie's wishes, by not touching her ever again unless she asks. And it's during their time in France that you can see their relationship slowly start to develop. It's a very slow progression. Rand lets Rosalie set the pace. Rand's main goal is to make Rosalie happy, give her pleasure, and try to make her forget how he hurt her. Rand slowly becomes the type of hero that Lisa Kleypas is very well known for. Her brand of an obsessed hero who just treasures the heroine. He adores her. He's possessive. He's just completely head over heels for Rosalie, who absolutely makes him work for her respect and for her love. I'm not really excusing what he did, and I don't think Lisa Kleypas was either. I feel like she wanted to write about a hero who just encompassed selfishness and entitlement and have him grow and learn from that. Like, he completely changes into someone who starts to care for someone, who actually loves someone. And that was just really fascinating to read about. Like, I could not put this book down. The beginning aside, the rest of the book is so good. I really enjoyed it. It's romantic, it's steamy, there's great character development, there is that classic scene in historical romance where one of the main characters gets hurt and the other one, the hero Rand, he stays by Rosalie's side vigilantly trying to take care of her and hoping that she wakes up. You can just very clearly see how gone Rand is for Rosalie. I'm pretty surprised Lisa Kleypas didn't go back and change the beginning of this book to republish it, because the rest of the book is truly great. I know she went back and changed one of her other titles, When Strangers Marry. Like, that title is actually the second title for that book. It was originally Only in Your Arms. She changed the content inside. She rebranded the cover and the title. So I feel like she could have done the same with this one, but I do understand of all of her books, of all of her old school historical romances, why she chose not to republish this one, because obviously the beginning, I still gave it 4 stars, the beginning notwithstanding. It's not like the best Lisa Kleypas romance that I've read, but I still really enjoyed it. Also, a little interesting tidbit is that Rand is very tanned. like there's an emphasis on his tan skin, which is of course not very common with the upper class, so it's kind of like him being a rebel. And the whole tan hero thing does show up a couple of times more in the other books that I read. Also, here is a closer look at this gorgeous cover. After I finished Where Passion Leads, I had to read the sequel, book 2 in the Berkeley Faulkner series, which is Forever My Love, with this beautiful blue cover. Like I said earlier, I wasn't planning on reading this one, but after I read Where Passion Leads and then I read the blurb for the sequel, I found out that this heroine was actually one of the secondary characters from Where Passion Leads, Mira, who is a French girl who becomes Rosalie's companion. She was 15 in Where Passion Leads, and 5 years later she is 20 in Forever My Love, and she gets her romance. So at the end of Where Passion Leads, Mira kind of runs away. In the 5 years since she's run away from Rosalie and Rand, she becomes this older man's mistress. Quote unquote mistress, because she doesn't actually sleep with him. She just pretends to be his mistress so that he can seem cooler to his friends, to his peers. Mira is this older lord's in-house mistress, so she lives in his house, in his home, and that's how she comes across our hero Alec during Lord Sackville's house party. Alec is the first Duke of Lisa Kleypas's that I've ever read. I'm not sure that she has any other dukes because I haven't read any others. It doesn't seem like Lisa Kleypas loves dukes all that much. Everything else is fair game, but I don't really see her writing all that many dukes. I was really excited to read this one because I loved Mira in book 1, but unfortunately I was so disappointed by this read. I didn't like her hero Alec. Mira, she was okay in the beginning, but then she really disappointed me at the end of the book. So this one is a very painful 2 stars for me. I did not enjoy it. I didn't hate it, but this was definitely not for me. Alec, our hero, is just so not likable. He's so judgmental. He judges Mira for being this older man's mistress. He says some pretty awful things to her face, and it's also just really hard to connect with this character. He puts on this mask, hides his emotions all the time, especially from the heroine. He was not the kind of Lisa Kleypas hero that I know and love, who is like totally obsessed and adoring of the heroine. I mean, he is obsessed with Mira, but he still treats her not that great. Also, these two spend a lot of time in the book apart, like months and months apart. After they sleep together for the first time, where she gives him her virginity, they don't even see each other again for months. And then there's another separation later, which I wasn't a really big fan of. Also, I hated that Alec slept with another woman after he slept with Mira. I was like, excuse me, what are you doing? But that's a personal preference for me, for my heroes. I don't really like heroes who do that, but it just really went to show how little effort Alec put in this romance. I just never really saw why Mira ever fell in love with him, because it just kind of happens in a snap. There's a lot of jealousy and possessiveness on his part. Again, he hates her being some other man's mistress, but it kind of got a little annoying because he gave off this vibe of, if I can't have you, no one can. And Mira herself was a little underwhelming for me in this book. She's older by 5 years in the sequel, but it doesn't seem like she actually changed all that much, because she does the exact same thing at the end of Forever My Love that she did at the end of Where Passion Leads. Like, she just runs away at the first sign of trouble. So she never really changed or grew from that. I did really like seeing Rosalie and Rand from book 1. They show up a lot here in book 2. We get to see them happy in love as parents. I was pretty interested in Alec being an architect. He designed Rand's house, he designed all these other places, but we never really get too much in depth with that. So unfortunately, I really struggled with this book. This is easily my least favorite, my new least favorite Lisa Kleypas book. I had a hard time with it, though I will say one of my favorite scenes in this book is the morning after Mira and Alec first slept together. Mira wakes up with Alec's medallion necklace around her hips, which was very interesting. Like, okay Alec, okay Lisa Kleypas, I can give behind this. I don't think there was as much steam in this book as there was in book 1 because again they spend a lot of time separated, but that whole necklace thing definitely imprinted on my mind. The thing that I love about Lisa Kleypas are her little moments like this necklace thing. It's such a small scene, such a small thing, but it's just so memorable. Lisa Kleypas' third published book is Love Come to Me with this original cover, and this is the only one of the 4 that is still published today. You can still grab the paperback and ebook unlike the others, and it's got this new cover. Love Come to Me is easily my favorite of Lisa Kleypas' old school historical romances. I love this one so much. I gave it 5 stars, maybe 4.5, but like I'm leaning towards 5 stars. I just loved our hero Heath so much. I also enjoyed Lucy's character as well, but Heath stole my heart here. This is not a Regency historical romance from Lisa Kleypas. It's actually set in America. It's set in New England, in Massachusetts, right after the Civil War, so the late 1800s. We have a New Englander heroine, Lucy, who falls for our Southerner hero, Heath. Heath is another tanned hero. She calls him very earthy. Heath has moved north to live in this small Massachusetts town, and one day while Lucy is walking home, she ends up almost drowning in a frozen river, and Heath saves her life. They spend 2 days together alone in Heath's cabin so that Lucy can recuperate, and because her reputation would be ruined and also Lucy has a fiance, they can never tell anyone that they spent like nights together. They also end up stuck together inside because of a snowstorm, so if you love that little trope, there's one here. Heath is just so wicked and charming. I loved him. Like, this man just exudes charm. He loves to tease Lucy. You can kind of tell how much Lisa Kleypas loves her Southern men because Heath is just Southern charm personified. I love that he calls Lucy Sin and Cinda because her full name is Lucinda, and he wants to call her something that no one else gets to call her. He is so obviously head over heels and gone for Lucy, but of course Lucy, being the proper New England girl, she can't consort with a Southerner, and she's trying her best to stay in love with her fiance Daniel, but Daniel really has nothing on Heath. He is way too rigid for Lucy, and it was just so wonderful to see Heath charm his way into Lucy's heart. The cute banter, the cute teasing, it was so lovely to read. There is also a marriage of convenience here. They end up in a bit of a compromised position, so they are forced to marry to save Lucy's reputation. And the second half of the book was interesting. Maybe not my favorite. I prefer the first half of the book, but the second half focused more on their life in Boston, where they move because Heath wants to become a journalist. He becomes a journalist, he buys this newspaper, and it focuses a lot on him being a businessman and Lucy adjusting to city life. There is a little bit of other woman drama towards the end of the book, which I didn't mind too much because Heath is so obviously in love with Lucy. He is just the most devoted and loving husband and man for her. Lucy is everything to him, and I just swooned. I just love this one so much, mainly because of Heath. I cannot emphasize enough how charming he is. I also really loved his business partner Damon, who unfortunately does not have a book. There's also another side character in Forever My Love, I think Alec's brother, who I was intrigued with, also does not have a book. Love Come to Me is a standalone. She never wrote anything for these side characters, but if Lisa Kleypas ever decided to revisit her old school stuff and write a book for Damon or that brother, I would be so happy about it. Also, reading this one, I have noticed how much more research goes into these older books. In her more recent books, her modern books, there's not much emphasis on like the setting, the time period, but you can definitely tell in these older books how much research she put into them, the clothes, like furniture, the food. There's just a lot more descriptions about the time periods in these older books. I am curious though, I'm not sure what to call this historical romance. Like, is it a western? Because it's not really a western. It's set in freaking Massachusetts, and they even moved to a big city, to Boston. Would people call this like an American historical romance? Because most of the ones that I read set in America are the westerns with the ranches and the cowboys and the horses. But I will say it was interesting reading about this different setting and a different time period. And the last of her original 4 old school romances is Give Me Tonight. After I finished the first 3 books, I had to finish up the last one because why not? Right after I finished Love Come to Me, I went to read the blurb for Give Me Tonight, and I saw that this one is a time travel historical romance, so I couldn't not read it. So this is a true Western romance. It's set in Texas, and this is what the cover looks like. It's set on the heroine's family's ranch, and the hero is her father's foreman. So the whole time travel thing, the heroine is from the 1930s. Addie is her aunt's caretaker. Her aunt is the only family that she has, and unfortunately her aunt passes away, and right after, Addie is time traveled back 50 years. She goes back 50 years in the same town. It's the 1880s, and she basically ends up replacing the Addie from the 1880s who looks exactly like her. There is a little bit more to this time travel romance. It's not just time travel, but I won't spoil it, and plus there isn't too much explanation about the time travel either. Addie actually goes along with the time travel fairly easily. I mean, she is scared and she is panicking, but she does go along with the 1880s fairly easily and knows what to do there. It's a pretty big change too, like it wasn't as feminist, there's no more cars, and she's back to corsets and everything. Our hero here is Ben, and he absolutely hated the previous Addie, the original Addie. So as soon as this Addie, the modern day Addie, meets Ben, they do not get along. It's enemies to lovers. Ben thought that the original Addie was super spoiled, a brat, so he hated her. And this Addie actually believed that Ben murdered her father, the father from the 1880s, because that's what her aunt told her from present day. So she figures her purpose is to prevent this murder, stop Ben from killing her dad. But of course, Ben is not what she thought he was. He is completely devoted to that ranch and to her father. I really enjoyed the slow progression of their romance. You can tell that Ben sees Addie for who she is now instead of before. She's a completely different person because she kind of is, and he starts to fall for her. If you enjoy westerns, you'll probably enjoy this one a lot. It's got a lot of cowboy talk. I honestly would not mind more cowboy romances from Lisa Kleypas because this was a lot of fun to read. I give it 4 stars, maybe 3.5, because the ending seemed a bit rushed to me, and also we don't actually get that many chapters in Ben's point of view. Generally, it's a fairly even number of chapters between the hero and heroine's point of view, but this book was mainly just Addie's point of view, and that was really disappointing. I would have loved more chapters from Ben's point of view. Here we do have another very tan hero, but at least in this setting and this story, Ben has a reason to be tanned, a reason to be muscular, because he's a cowboy, a rancher. He does physical work every day out in the fields. This book was the one that had the most heavy suspense and mystery plot. I would say this one is more on par with her newest release, with Devil in Disguise, with the whole mystery. The romance was pretty sweet, but nothing amazing. It's fairly slow burn, and again, I wanted more from the hero's perspective, but I did love that he actually confessed his love first, which I didn't really see too much in the other books. Also, one thing I noticed with these older historical romances from Lisa Kleypas is that her heroes, like their backgrounds, are pretty vague. Ben and Heath especially, there's like maybe a page or 2 mentions of their backgrounds, where they came from, both of their troubled pasts. It's not mentioned really that much, and we don't actually get to learn that much about them either. It's not a huge deal, but it was something that I noticed, and it probably would have been better if we got a little bit more background and depth to their pasts. That is it for my Lisa Kleypas video, all 5 of my reads. If you do end up reading Devil in Disguise, let me know your thoughts. I really hope you guys love it. And if you end up finding a copy of any of these old school romances, I highly recommend you give them a try. It was just so interesting to see how much Lisa Kleypas has grown as an author over 30 years. She's basically been writing longer than I've been alive. And if you are looking for these old school editions, good luck with your search. It took me quite a while to find all of these. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!